I'm here with Dean O'Brien, who's an independent photojournalist and working man from Coventry. Thank you so much, Dean, for coming to speak to the branch today and show off some of the photographs that you've taken over the last 10 years on your travels to Ukraine and surrounding areas. Can you tell our people, our members, our viewers, how you became sort of interested in what was going on over there?
Well, I've been travelling there for 10 years and I did a degree in photography. So I did a few projects out there and I was looking at the way of life out there, capitalism, communism. Gradually things started to kind of fall apart. I saw the rise of the far right when I was there, Nazis on the street, Lenin monuments being pulled down. I used to tell people about this, it fell on deaf ears, nobody was really interested, they couldn't really see the bigger picture of what was happening here. Then in 2014 you had what they called the Euromaidan, the coup that was staged by the West, that was backed by the UK and America, saw the overthrow of a legally elected government in Ukraine that spiralled the country into a civil war that has now led to where we are today, 8 years later. And that's where we're at.
Yeah. And you went over there obviously before the 2014 sort of coup and after. How are the people that you've met in Ukraine, how have they changed, or what sort of change have you noticed in that time?
When I went there initially, everybody in Ukraine spoke Russian. Regardless of what anyone says, their national language is Russian. Everywhere you go, all the street signs are in Russian. And there was no problem. Russians, people that are pro-Russian, pro-Ukrainian, all live together well. It's been stirred up by the West. Build up to 2014. Then they brought in decommunisation rules, which technically were anti-Russian, so street signs had to be changed. If anything was named after, like Gagarin, Tolstoy, Lenin, all the street names changed, tubeway, metro stations changed. People that were then being pulled up in restaurants for speaking Russian. Police men were being escorted around the streets of Kiev by members of a nationalist group called Korpus, who were then pointing the police, going over to Russian shops, get your sign changed, pulling people up on the street. So you were seeing that, and that was all happening. I don't think I ever read about it in Western media, though. They weren't interested.
And obviously you've shown us some of the photographs that you've taken of these Azov battalions, just Nazis sort of standing out on the street. What's the atmosphere like? Did people respond to it, or is it just sort of normal?
Do you know what the worst thing is? People have become desensitised to it. It's normal. People aren't happy about it, but they can't speak out because you will be beaten on the street. And if these guys are hanging out with the police, well, you can't go to a police officer then, can you?
I mean, this is what a lot of people will say on social media. Oh, well, the neo-Nazis are there, but they're not in the government. They're not supported by the government, but they're
embedded within it. And you have to remember these people are backed by the government as well, financially as well. So they are part of the fabric of Ukrainian society now.
Yeah, and I guess this kind of has an impact on the general sort of culture within Ukraine. If you're constantly seeing Nazi symbols and reading celebrations of Nazi collaborators in your history, you kind of, is it something that people will express? Just normal people on the street, are they sort of taken in by this?
They're not. The older people aren't. Because they know the history of this. But the strange thing is they still have these anniversaries where they celebrate members of the Galician SS, but they fought and they Sieg Heil on the street and they march with the symbols, and it's ignored by the West. And Western correspondents that are based in Ukraine, they're quite quick to report on certain issues, yet they ignore this. And that raises questions as well. Why they're not reporting on this?
And obviously you've been to the Donbass region as well. Can you tell us a bit about the people that you met there?
Yeah, the people there, they feel like they've been forced into this situation. They didn't want to recognise the overthrew government because it wasn't legally elected. So they formed the breakaway region, and because of doing that now, they've been shelled for 8 years by the Western-backed Ukrainian government. And as we know, Western governments have been sending lethal military aid to the Donbass region.
And the people there, they don't want revenge or retribution. They just want peace.
That's all they ever told me about peace. They didn't speak about any form of revenge. What they did want is peace talks with Zelensky. President Zelensky, for his time in office, has constantly refused to sit down and negotiate with the other side. Hence why a peace agreement was never going to come to fruition. If he wouldn't speak with them, they couldn't. And that, again, has brought us to where we are today. This conflict is on the hands of Zelensky and the people that have backed him.
And I guess that's the thing that people aren't seeing in the media. You know, what's happened over the last 8 to 10 years that's built up to the invasion by Russia. I mean, what would you, what's the key thing that you want to say to people who basically get all their news from the BBC and other mainstream news channels that basically, you know, believe the narrative that they're being told?
You need to look at both sides of this. This is why I originally went out to Donbass anyway. I was told Russian soldiers were there. I was told about these nasty people in Donbass, and it couldn't be further from the truth. There's no Russian soldiers there, and what I would say is to people in the West, be very selective, search for more, probably look on social media called Telegram, follow people on there, people that are actually in the zone now. Be more selective about where you get your news from. What we're seeing now is a massive saturation of Western-backed propaganda.
Yeah.
That's the word, propaganda, that we're being told, and you're only being told one side of this. We're not seeing any footage of Russian soldiers being greeted by the people of the villages as they enter these towns in Ukraine. It's like a media blackout, so just wake up.
Yeah. And can you suggest some sort of channels or platforms that people can sort of look out? I know that RT's been banned. They just seem to be banning anything that that is, you know, independent from the mainstream narrative. But I mean, we have to look now. We have to search out to find independent news. So do you have any channels that you can suggest?
Yeah, there's one called War Gonzo. That's on Telegram. There's Intel Slava. I sort of think there's one called ASB Military. You can pick these up on Twitter and probably get a link to their Telegram page from there. But I would just be very selective about which ones you look at and make your own mind up. Yeah.
And lastly, you're planning to hopefully head back to Russia in the next couple of months. What are you hoping to find when you're there? Like, what sort of stories are you wanting to tell?
I want to speak to the normal people on the street and get their opinion. And I advise this to anybody who wants to travel there as well. Just get a rucksack and just go and wander around. Don't go with any kind of agenda. Just wander around the streets, speak to people in bars, people in cafes, get their opinion. And what you'll find is the people are very welcoming to people in the West, regardless of what you'd be told by the news, and get their opinions. But none of them wanted this conflict. I can tell you now, none of them.
I think that's something that's been so interesting over the last week, is like how quickly people in Britain want to punish Russian people for the actions of their government, whether you agree or disagree with, you know, what is happening or not. People have forgotten that, you know, innocent civilians are often like the biggest sort of victims in these kinds of situations, and whether you agree with Putin or not, you shouldn't want the Russian people to suffer, because they're, you know, we have more in common with them than what we do with anyone else, with, you know, Putin with Boris Johnson or Zelensky. We have more in common with the Russian working people, the Ukrainian working people, than we do with anyone in power. So thank you so much for coming to speak to us, and hopefully we'll speak to you again soon, and keep us updated on what's happening.
Thanks for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you so much.